Last week I told you how I had reached the exalted position for me of number 7 double bass in the National Youth Orchestra of Great Britain. The excitement of this year was that at the April concert, which was to be in the Royal Festival Hall in London, our patron was to be present, Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother. So on that day, after our rehearsal in the morning, we all were asked by Dr. Railton to line up in the ballroom in practice to receive the Queen Mother's greeting to us. And I found myself halfway down a staircase, so I thought, oh bother, I don't think Queen Mother's going to stop halfway down a staircase to talk. But imagine my delight when at I think it was tea time, Dr. Railton came and said, oh, the main lift, which the Queen Mother was to have used to come down from the royal box to the ballroom, had gone out of action. So we all had to line up in a different position from the lift that she would emerge. So this time I found I was in a very good position. Anyway, after the concert, down we went. And to make it speedy, of course, we left our double basses, but we took our bows with us to we had to take something, apparently. So along came the Queen Mother, sailing along with her tiara that I recognised, and rubies. I recognised them because my sisters in Edinburgh, when we were children, collected what we called scraps. And these were pictures of all sorts of things, but the best were those of the royal family. And on that scrap were the actual rubies that the Queen Mother was wearing. She was wearing a pink dress, I remember. And she came along and stopped kind of opposite-ish me. And we were standing there without our double basses. We're standing like this in our shirt and black trousers and perhaps a tie, must have been. And we had our bows standing there like military people. And the Queen, Dr. Railton said to she was in blue, and Dr. Railton said to the Queen Mother, Ma'am, these are the double basses. And I remember thinking, the Queen Mother, poor lady, you could almost see her thinking, what shall I say to the double basses? And she looked at a few of us and said, you must feel rather strange without your instruments. There was a deadly silence. So I thought, well, someone's got to say something. So I said, yes, Ma'am. And our eyes met. So that was my bit of excitement. And then the Queen Mother sailed off and out of the staircase into the dark night, saying it's been a lovely evening. And it was certainly fun for us. But I have to tell you another story of national anthems. The summer before that, the orchestra was going on tour, and so we had a special service in the Royal School of Church Music in Addington Palace in those days, because Ruth Railton said she needed God's blessing on the orchestra, such an important group of young people flying off in one aeroplane. Now I was at that time, as you remember, number 12 double bass, so there wasn't room for 12 double basses in the aeroplane. Anyway, the concert, the pre-tour concert, was in the Fairfield Hall in Croydon, and I well remember the audience rose for, as we always did, we started with the national anthem. And so on, and then they all sat down. And because the orchestra was going to Israel, we then started to, and the Israeli ambassador was present, that was the point. We started with this lovely Israeli anthem, which was a very beautiful one, in E minor, very beautiful one. I can't remember it at the minute, but it was very soulful and very musical one, far more, well, our own national anthem is actually very distinguished, but not as beautiful as the Israeli one. So everybody had to heave themselves to their feet in the audience and sit down again and sort of chatter, a second national anthem. So with that, because the orchestra was continuing on to Greece, we then started playing in F major, the sort of jolly Greek national anthem. And by that time, the ladies and gentlemen of the audience were beginning to get tired of all this high jinks, up and down and up and down and up and down. And so, of course, the chatter at the end of 3 national anthems could only be stopped by us going into the whatever the overture was. It might have been Ruslan and Ludmilla de Wojak, something exciting. So we got good at playing the national anthem. And while I'm on that tack, I think we ought to hear Beethoven, the wonderful, what had become the European national anthem, set off by the double basses in the choral symphony. And so on. And so wonderful that it's given to the rich sound of the double bass. Now the double bass, many people sort of, well, a bit like the bassoon, and a slight joke to some people, but actually I well remember not attending a rehearsal, that was the point. The orchestra was playing the Bach 2-violin concerto, and all the double basses had been rehearsing it, and for some reason they were asked not to play in a particular rehearsal. And I can still remember passing the round little window of the gymnasium of that particular hall in Surrey, I think it was, a school in Surrey, and hearing this wonderful music, but without any double basses. The cellos were playing the bass line, but I could immediately tell that something really crucial was missing. And ever since then I'd realised the importance of the double bass as the foundation of the orchestra, of the symphony orchestra. Someone said to me, Stephen, who's out there, said to me, it must have been rather tiring carrying your double bass around the hills of Edinburgh. Edinburgh built on 7 hills, like Rome. Or was it Athens? I can't remember. Anyway, this double bass of my grandfather's, and I want you to see, if you can, this lovely picture of my grandfather. Very, very fine man he was, whose double bass this was, and his complete method for the double bass. That was typical of him. He always used to say, if you're going to do a job, it's worth putting your heart and soul into it. And there is his name engraved upon the complete method for the double bass. I realised once I was going into the National Youth Orchestra, I would need a proper case instead of just a canvas. I think I started with a green, rather holy, in another sense the word, case. And so I discovered that there were what we called coffins. They were huge boxes which went right round the double bass, totally safely, and made of brown painted wood. Now the coffins that I got to know about were the property of the Edinburgh Reel and Strathspey Society. So the way to get this was to go and spend an evening doing lovely Scottish country dance music. I mean, it was just a delightful idea, with probably pizzicato and so on. Really delightful music, and I can still remember sitting in the orchestra for the Reel and Strathspeys one evening only. It was all they asked, in order to be given a huge case. Now this huge case, when I set off I was going by rail to London for one of the orchestra courses, we put it on top of our Austin-Cambridge saloon car. We had a roof rack, and we put this huge box and strapped it down to go from central Edinburgh up the hill to the Waverley station. Now, of course, as we rounded the corner from our quite small street, as we rounded the corner into the terrace to join the main road up to town, along came with her shopping bag Mrs. Scott, our lovely neighbour, and she saw this strange sight and put her hand to her mouth. She thought it was a family funeral on the cheap. And of course we were glad to wave to her and say, it's okay, we're all right, everybody's still here. This great box, of course, had to go into the guard's van all the way to London. And again, at London, I remember a great big porter who wanted to get the box out to show he was very strong. And the box had 4 casters on the bottom, so I could push it along the street or along the platform, wherever I was. And he was so big and strong, he grabbed the whole coffin, the whole box, But he picked it up in his hand. I mean, most of us couldn't do that. But unfortunately, he misjudged the door of the guard's van, and one of the casters got knocked and came hurtling off. And so ever since then, the coffin sort of rattled in a strange way. That was how we transported it for the safety of the instrument. But of course, when I was at Cambridge, I remember in my second year travelling down from Edinburgh to London and then changing stations or changing trains anyway. And I had 13 bits of luggage just for me. There was a record player, a radio, there was a suitcase or two, I suppose, and see, I can't imagine how I got up to 13, but I did. And I had a huge cage in the station, and of course I had the double bass. And what we used to do at the end of each term, about 6 of us, was push a trolley through this road of Cambridge, which hardly be room nowadays with the traffic, but I can still remember pushing it up that way to the station for the next bit of the journey. The double bass has all sorts of possibilities. One of them, of course, is the great delight of jazz, and that is where the bow is not really needed, and you get wonderful people. Double basses in jazz are really first rate, and the movement they can do at top speed is breathtaking. And I've had fun with a friend working away on jazz. We shared, sometimes I was on piano, he on bass, and we've vice versa. And it's a very, very rewarding music making activity. When you're a classical musician, there's a terrific discipline, well, both in the word of actual working, but also discipline in the sense of learning all the time. But it's the loveliest sort of work, if you call it that, or calling. I'm so blessed to be allowed to be that. But jazz is very demanding too, in a totally different way. But the musical effect is, if you're not actually doing it, is very relaxing and because it's so different from classical music. It's a wonderful change. It does one very much good, and it is, as I say, a very demanding medium, very thrilling, and very full of admiration I am for every jazz musician. Wonderful. Finally, perhaps I better bring this to a close. I took my double bass back up to Edinburgh and decided that I wasn't going to be playing it for perhaps 2 years when I first went back to Edinburgh, and so I lent it to my school, which was down quite nearby, and they were happy to have a double bass to lend out to one of the schoolboys or schoolgirls. And then about 2 years later, I think this is when I wanted to do jazz, and I went back to the school and they said, yes, come and find your double bass. And so they didn't let me find it, they found it for me. That was how it happened. And I took this double bass down in a bag. It was in a canvas case, so I didn't actually look at it. And I took it in a taxi back home to my flat. And then when I got it out, I thought, this is not my double bass, a bit like a mother cow. You do know your creatures. It didn't have this beautiful design here. And this, by the way, thanks to my grandfather, is a French instrument, 19th century, late 19th century, and is of more value than I realised, because I thought double basses were nothing like cellos, but it is valued not at nothing, I tell you. And it's a very beautiful instrument. Anyway, I took the one that was not mine back to the school, and they gave me another one in a case and said, we're so sorry, this is yours. So I took it back in another taxi. I remember I'm a Scot, another taxi, and opened it up, and I couldn't believe it. That wasn't my double bass either. So I went back to the school and said, look, I'm really sorry, but where is my double bass? And they shook their heads, and then a phone call came a day or two later. The double bass teacher of the school at that time had decided it that my double bass needed repairs. So they sent it off to a wonderful chap called Mr. MacDonald in Portobello, one of the very much up and come again areas of Edinburgh with some beautiful houses there. And so I took another taxi down to Portobello, and to find my double bass in pieces. He had stripped the front off. It was literally in pieces. Everything was separate. And of course he knew what he was doing. So I went back about a month later, and he'd put it together. And he said, it's a lovely double bass. In fact, he really wanted to buy it. And do you know what he said? He said he wanted to use it for jazz. I was so interested. And here it is. Here it is. And there you are. And thank you for watching.